Why do people use fiction? This is my summary of the research by Hirschman, E.C., in 1983, who published the work Predictors of Self-Projection, Fantasy Fulfilment and Escapism, the Journal of Social Psychology. This is from volume 121, page 63 to 76, and here's the DOI. Anyway, Hirschman conducted a multiple regression analysis on 532 participants. The researcher initially proposed 4 hypotheses, whereby the research defined the criterion of projections and fantasies as hedonic behavior, HB, that encompassed imaginal, emotional, and multisensory elements. Individuals may engage in HB to confront or anticipate unhappy realities to better cope with these situations. Individuals look back on negative events of the past in order to understand the problem and cope better with the problem. Examples given in this study include looking at documentaries about how African Americans coped with enslavement or how Jewish people coped with the Holocaust. The second proposition is that individuals project into a particular role or character. In watching plays or movies or playing video games, this allows the individual to become someone else, to have a priori character identification. This proposition doesn't necessarily explain why people would do this. The third proposition is that it may help individuals to construct fantasies and augment reality. This proposition states that there is a subjective need to produce desires to create fantasies / unreality. The subjective need is said to be similar to objective needs for survival like food and shelter. Later in the article, subjective needs are said to be brought about by understimulation / under-arousal. The fourth proposition or hypothesis is that fantasy or fiction helps to escape the unpleasant realities, to distract one's self from unhappy events. This is termed escapism, whereby individuals use fantasy as an anxiety reduction mechanism. So the method of this research relied on criterion definitions that were created to operationalize propositions for obviously practical purposes. Problem projection is defined as the self-projection by the individual into an external portrayal of the problem one has or expects to encounter. For example, observing how others react in unhappy situations. The researcher also used response categories, such as what media form did people choose? So, for example, movies, books, TV shows, plays, etc. Role projection is the pursuit of activities which help to provide a role or character into the individual's self-projection. To operationalize role projection, individuals were asked about how much time they spent on certain forms of media. There was also fantasy fulfillment purchasing, which is the presence or absence of purchasing behavior to fulfill a fantasy, and this was coded in binary format, so either 1 or 0. Escapism, the purpose of this was to engage in avoidance of unpleasantness in their own lives. So if the participant said that they had certain unpleasant stresses in their own lives, then one could assume that this may be a form of escapism, as in the activities that they are pursuing could help escape from the situation. There are also escapism behavior categories, which include reading novels, playing music, watching movies, plays, TV shows, dancing, concerts, sports, playing sports, driving a car, eating, attending religious services, and experiencing nature or the great outdoors. In addition, there were in this experiment demographic predictors, which included age. Age was found to have strong negative correlation with hedonic behavior. Education had a strong positive correlation with hedonic behavior. Occupational status had a positive correlation with some hedonic behavior. And birth order had a negative association with hedonic behavior, as early birth order enhanced the stimulation during childhood due to the child having more parental attention. We must also consider socio-psychological predictors, such as ethnicity, which explored nationality and religious affiliation, imagery, like the desire to construct imaginary sequences, recall memories, and alter consciousness at will with these. Also, we must consider social isolation and novelty seeking as socio-psychological predictors. Another thing to consider of the socio-psychological predictors includes sensation seeking, which are when individuals acquire sensory stimulation and they risk engaging in potentially dangerous activities. Adult information exposure is the mass media usage. Basically, it's the amount of time that they spend and the type of media that they use. And we also must consider childhood stimulation exposure, which is similar to the category above. Now I'll be talking about the results or discussion of this correlation study. Individuals engaging in problem projection tend to be from the working class, quite young, and religiously Jewish or a part of a religious minority. They have above average imagination. When I talk about these, I'm talking about averages. And consider that this research was compiled in, the 1980s. So this, of course, would be limited to a certain time and certain place being the United States. Interpretation of problem projection includes that these individuals were possibly understimulated due to poorer socioeconomic status or having less parental attention. They had little mental or sensory stimulation as a result. They also tend to engage in personal problems which had no relevant role models or prior experience, thus resorting to projection to develop internal coping strategies. Role projection are when individuals from here tend to also be young, from the working class, have above average imagination, but have below average childhood stimulation. The researcher interpreted role projection as individuals seeking novelty and adventure, but they have little in the way of parental role models or lack the necessary childhood experiences or financial resources. Thus, they focus on an active imagination and seek externally constructed roles to fulfill this desire. Onto our third proposition. Fantasy fulfillment purchasing. On average, individuals who engage in fantasy fulfillment purchasing tend to be younger, have strong Jewish or Catholic religiosity, as in they are a part of a religious minority in the United States. They have above average sensation seeking and childhood stimulation. So the researcher interpreted this as high childhood stimulation can enhance imaginative capacity and subsequent ability to create fantasies. They have a high predisposition towards sensory arousal, which may drive individuals to purchase products that satisfy this need. Escapism. Finally, onto our last proposition. Individuals who engage in escapism tend to be highly educated, part of a minority religion, and to be over age 30. Also, they tend to feel socially estranged in personal values, probably due to being of the minority group. They desire ways to avoid current unhappy events or get away from anxieties. Also, they tend to be associated with high anxiety levels and have high awareness of differences between one's own values and that of society, and have a need to escape unpleasant realities. So in summation, we looked at problem projection, role projection, fantasy fulfillment purchasing, and escapism. We looked at possible reasons as to why individuals engage in those, whether it be to see how one copes with stress, or to experience what this role or this perspective might entail for the individual, or to ultimately escape from the stresses of day-to-day life. Of course, limitations of this study include that this is possibly outdated, that it lacks that it is merely a correlation study, and it's relevant only for a certain particular place and time. So in the United States in the 80s. And yeah, thanks for watching.